Hey everyone, I'm Haley. This is Bitter Kitten Crafts. This is a channel where we talk about knitting and crocheting and crafting and yarn. And today is Crochet Corner. This is the first Crochet Corner I've filmed in like literally a year. So I have a lot of progress to talk to you all about and updates and granny squares to show you. It's gonna be like granny square Palooza over here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and jump in and show you my progress on the new blanket that I started. So I have been working on this blanket since September, and now I have about 116, I think, squares. And I'm really close to being done because I was planning to make 144. And so I'm really close. It's been, oh, that's not even all of them. But so these are some of the squares I've been working on. And this is my new granny square project. So we can, now that I showed you all my squares, we can kind of get into, oh hi Cheeto, we can kind of get into more specifics about my project. So if you watched my last Crochet Corner, which was literally like a year ago, I had been working on a different granny square blanket that was also like a king size blanket for my bed, and it's finished. But I didn't want to disturb the cats because they were sleeping on it. So I'm going to put some B-roll of it. It's the one that I had finished. I don't know if you can hear the train. The one that I had finished, it was 64 squares. Each square was 12 rows. And that was because each square ended up being 50 grams. And my hook was a G. And it was sort of like an extremely scrappy blanket where it was my scraps, it was other people from the yarn store scraps. It was just like really a scrappy blanket. And so in my personal opinion, the colors weren't the most beautiful that they could be. So I started a second blanket pretty much immediately upon sewing that one together, which was like late August. And this one is much more coordinated and planned out. So I think maybe you could probably tell by the colors that I held up, but this blanket, my goal was for it to be like pinks and purples and oranges and yellows. And then I'll show you in a bit, I have another section of yarn set aside that's like more cool colors. My cat is going crazy back there. More kind of cool colors that I'll start a third blanket with. Something about me is that I cannot like sit still or keep my hands still to save my life. So granny squares are a huge facet of my crafting and making just because they're portable. I bring them everywhere with me. I nanny, so, oh my gosh, they really keep falling. I nanny, so when my kids are like in Taekwondo or whatever, I have blanket squares to work on, and they fit in my pocket even. When I'm taking the metro, they fit in my pocket. So they're really the perfect project to kind of bring everywhere, which is how I've made so many so quickly. I guess really like September, October, November, December, January, February. 6 months is like not that crazy fast, to be honest. Cheeto's gonna knock something over. So I guess like 120 squares in 6 months isn't that wild and crazy. It's like about 20 squares a month, which I am really happy with. There are some months where I made way more than 20, and then there are some months where I only made 2 or 3, but the end sort of average ends up being about 20. And just to give you kind of the specs, so a lot of this yarn, it's sock yarn held double, and it's pinks were my main kind of color scheme. This one's worsted weight acrylic. This is sock yarn held double. And then about a third of them are kind of stripy. So when I ran out of a ball of yarn, I would just add it to my little reusable bag, and then eventually I would have enough to make some stripy ones out of the scraps of the leftover squares. So each square ends up being about exactly 20 grams. It's like 19.7 grams, which is how I ended up with 7 rows. And the specs are that it's a G-size hook, and yeah, it's sock yarn held double for 7 rows, and each square blocks out to be about 8 inches. So my goal was to do 144, which will fit my king size bed really well. So the way that I did the math is that each square of my other blanket that fits my king size bed has 12 clusters, and there were 64 squares, which means 8 times 12, which is 96 clusters going across and then 96 clusters going down. And so I decided that these are 7 clusters across, and I wanted to do 12 by 12 because 12 times 7 is, yeah, like I think like 84. And that way I would have 12 fewer. So essentially it's, you know, a little bit smaller than the blanket I previously made, but it still would cover and drape over the edges of my bed. I hope that made sense. I'm like not good at math, so I don't know if that made sense at all. But the outcome is that I have a second king-size blanket for my bed and my room. It's not the second blanket I've made. It's probably like the 8th or 9th blanket that I've finished, but it's definitely up there in terms of sizing, in terms of the largest, and also in terms of the quality. So I have a couple granny square blankets that I've made that are 100% acrylic. One of them is like that Lion Brand Landscapes yarn, so it's 100% single ply acrylic, and I made it in like probably 2017-ish. So the colors still look beautiful because it's acrylic, but it's aged very poorly in terms of softness and in terms of, unfortunately, like microplastic disintegration. I don't know another way to say it. Like the fibers are thinner than they were because it's single ply and it's itchy. So my goal has been to migrate away from kind of cheap acrylic and migrate towards using what I have and using scraps and using sock yarn. So some of these are acrylic, like this one is acrylic. This is an acrylic I had in my stash for a very long time. So I basically just used what I had. I don't know if y'all remember AC Moore, RIP, but they had mill ends. And so this is a wool mill end that I got when AC Moore still existed. So basically my plan was to make about 5 per color maximum, because each 100 gram skein that I had, like this one I have 5, each 100 gram skein that I had, each square is 20 grams. So that means that I was able to get 5 maximum. But then there's a lot of colors where I only have 1. And there's also a lot that are striped, like this one's a little rainbow stripe situation. And then I have some more that are all just kind of random colors striped together. And the goal with the striped ones was to make sure that every single square contained at least one shade of pink. So not all the solid ones contain pink. Obviously this one has like pink confetti tweed type situation, but a lot of them don't have any pink. They have purple instead or white instead. And then some of them are like, this one's just like from this sweater, my scraps. A lot of them are just like what I had in my apartment. So some of this yarn is like ancient. This one has kind of, I guess you could call it magenta. This is a sparkle yarn I dyed with Kool-Aid a really long time ago. So it's a complete jumble of colors, which I think is so fun, but it's all machine washable. I'm hoping, I think. It's either sock yarn or acrylic. So it should all be 100% machine washable yarn. And I'm really excited to see how this seams together. So I'm planning to crochet it together with also my G hook and also with the scraps that I have. I need like about 28 more squares. And so my plan for that is that I have, let's see if I have it here. I have, this bag has been where I've been keeping all my yarn. And at first it was full and now it's like slowly dwindled, which feels so good. So I have this left, and then I have this left, and then I have, I think, one more. Yeah, and then I have this. And this is another Kool-Aid dyed sparkly. I don't know if you can see the sparkles. So I have these 3 left, which should be about 15 squares. And once I crochet up these, the rest will all be kind of the stripy scraps situation, like this one. And that should get me to my 28. And honestly, it kind of feels crazy to be this close to the end of it because it's been a really long-term project. But the last blanket I worked on, it took me 2 years to make, so really, this is like a pretty short-term crochet project for me. I rarely make a small crochet project. Most of the time, they're like huge blankets and stuff, just because I don't really have a need for a lot of smaller things. But I did get an acquisition that might change that, so I'll show that in a bit. So now that I've dumped all of this everywhere, and oh, this is just like refine yarn I like got on clearance for a couple dollars, and this is the same thing with this. This is, I don't know if they still make this. This is like Lion Brand Sakis. And one other way that I got some of this yarn was that there's a craft thrift store near me in Virginia. It's called Upcycle reusable craft center, and they have bins of yarn and you can fill a bag for $10. So when I was first starting this project, I went there and I filled up a big $10 bag with as many pink scraps as I could take. And that's where a lot of these little stripey scraps came from. Just kind of their clearance bin and their scrap bin, and then the rest are used up from other full-size squares. So I don't actually know how many of each kind I have right now, but I know that the heavy majority is the solids. But that was a lot of talking about this project. To be honest, I didn't know I'd have that much to say about it. So stay tuned to see me seam it together, and let's move on to other sort of plans and dreams for crochet. So I wanted to also share the huge blanket plan that I have for after this one's done, which should be in about like a month, I hope. I'll probably film my next crochet corner video when this blanket's finished. But this is the yarn I have set aside for the next blanket. This is in like one of those garment bags from TJ Maxx, so ignore that. I don't know what the brand is, but this is another, it's like a lot of yarn, right? Like a lot of yarn is in here. So some of this was gifted to me, and there was a woman in my building who just moved out and I helped her move out. And so she gave me a lot of her crafting supplies that she just sort of had stored away. And so this blanket is gonna be a lot more acrylic heavy than the current blanket I'm working on, which is very much predominantly wool. And I'm interested to see kind of the difference because I think that the predominantly wool blanket will have a lot more drape than this one, but I'll go ahead and show some of the yarn that I have planned for this color palette. A lot of it, like I said, is acrylic, which I honestly don't ever really purchase for myself, but some of it's self-striping sock yarn. It's gonna be very much like a greens and blues type of color palette, which I think will be really cute. I have a lot of this kind of color, like an aqua-y type color, and I have a lot of just like royal blue type color. So I think it'll be kind of the similar situation to the pinks where it's just all squares jumbled together with no sort of rhyme or reason. This skein could have gone in either blanket, but I wanted to keep it in the blues just to add some more interest and diversity to this color palette. This is very predominantly like an aqua type color palette, and I really don't know what most of this yarn even is. This is like a little 20-gram skein, so the specs of this blanket should be pretty much the exact same as the other blanket, where I'm planning to do 20-gram squares that are each 7 rows with my G hook, basically like an identical blanket to the first one. No borders on the squares, no joining as you go border, just crochet, single crochet together. And I'm basically just using up stash. That's been my main goal for 2025, is to use up what's stored under my bed and to use yarn that I got for free, or kind of keep my yarn purchasing to as much of a minimum as I can. And I definitely have a lot of yarn in this color palette, like either in my personal stash, or I guess this was like this woman who gave me all this yarn. I guess like maybe green or blue was her favorite color, because all of the self-striping sock yarn, that's from her. And it's pretty colors, but I don't really think I need socks in these colors or anything. So there's just a ton of yarn in here. There's some like this is like Joann's yarn, but it's wool nylon blend, but it's all very beautiful, and I'm grateful to my older neighbor for sharing with me. Ultimately, it feels good to kind of put this yarn to a good home and know that it will end up in a beautiful project, and know that I can, you know, finance my crocheting in other ways than just buying a bunch of yarn. I probably will end up having to go back to the craft thrift store to supplement this, although I feel like this might get me like pretty far into my next blanket, like at least over halfway towards another blanket with all these scraps, because this is, you know, a lot of yarn, like a laundry sack of yarn. So I'm really excited to start this one. I ended up having a couple squares that I pulled out of my first blanket because they were too blue, which I don't know. I probably could have thrown them in, but this way I have a head start on my next blanket. So this one is just this one is just like not self-striping sock yarn, but I did go ahead and pull it out of my other blanket just because I feel like it will match this one a lot better. And there's a couple more like that in here that I'm not going to dig through this and find, but it should be, you know, identically sized and identically kind of situated to the other one, just the opposite color scheme. of blues and greens, and I have many months of crocheting ahead of me now. So I also have a couple of smaller crochet projects like in the pipeline that I wanted to talk about and share because it's fun. I've been realizing with my knitting, it's been really fun to make smaller little things and have like the joy of finishing something in like a day or 2 or 3 days. And so I have this bag of cotton yarns. This is all my cotton scraps from basically ever. I've made a bunch of, I'll put a photo of them. I've made a bunch of like beach bags out of this cotton, and there's this pattern that I really, really like. It's by All About Amy. It's where you make 13 granny squares out of cotton and then you assemble them in this certain way where it makes a bag with handles. And I really like that pattern, so I've made like 4 or 5. And this is all my scraps left over from those. And so it's time to do something with them, I think. I don't need any more bags, but what I desperately need is plant rugs. So we just moved into a new apartment and my plants are now all along the whole windowsill of my whole apartment, which is like right behind you. And I really feel kind of a concern about my security deposit in leaving them that way. So my intention is to crochet probably like 30 or 40 little plant rugs with this yarn. So I may end up doing granny squares for my plant rugs, but I also may end up doing just like double crochet stripey little squares. I don't know yet. I have honestly a good amount of yarn that I can make sort of a big dent in them just with this. I don't know if I'll even need to buy any more cotton. And I have a lot of little tiny scraps of color too, so it could be cute to do some stripey ones. I really feel that this is a need for my security deposit. You know, it's better to not destroy the windowsill. In my last apartment, I did kind of destroy the paint and everything on the windowsill, so I'm trying to be mindful about that in this new place. The other small project I have is another skein of yarn from my neighbor when she moved out, and this is called Stitch Soak Scrub by Lion Brand. I think you can see it's basically like loofah material. It's really neat. It's like thin, ignore my nails. It's like thin 100% nylon, like loofah, basically. And so my plan, I don't know, she just had one and I just took it home. And it's only 92 yards in this, but my plan is to just hold it double, I think, and crochet like a little circular scrubby for my kitchen. And if I like it, I might buy more. You know, things are getting really expensive. And if I can kind of eliminate one regular purchase, which is sponges, then I would love to. And I know it seems silly, like it's really not that much money to buy sponges, but the more of it I can sort of eliminate, the better, I think. So this was free to me, and it's machine washable, so I'll be able to just throw it in our laundry, which seems really nice, to be honest. It seems like maybe more sanitary than leaving the sponges like on the counter, and I think overall this might end up being a good solution. So my plan is to just crochet like a circular scrubby and see if it actually works or not. I'll let you know. If it does work, I definitely plan to purchase more of this. I don't think it can be possibly that expensive, so I'll find out, and I'll keep y'all updated on whether or not it works. So my other tiny crochet plans are because of this acquisition. So Joann's is going out of business, as I think we probably all know, and I checked out the book section, and I'm really happy I did because this was on 40% off, and it's really cute. There's so many. I think on the back you can see, like, these are all the patterns in the book, and there's so many. Look at the little swans. I'm obsessed with the little swanling, and I think that this book will actually get used, unlike some of the other pattern books, which I'm like very guilty of not using. Look at the little owl sweater, like that's adorable. I think it would be fun to try amigurumi. I've made some little knitted guys, but I've never crocheted like an animal like this before. I know that you have to have like a really tight gauge, but I think it could be fun to do some in wool. Like this little guy, he would look so cute as like a fuzzy little mohair little mammoth. And, you know, the lion's mane would look really cute in wool. So I'm going to try using some of the scraps I have in my stash and see if I can make any little guys. I think it'd be really fun. So if you get a chance to go to your Joann's, well, that's closing, RIP, definitely, you know, check out the book section because this was a really good find. I think it was like $6 or $7, and I'm really just happy to have it in my collection. I plan to make, yeah, the first one I want to make is the little mammoth guy. He's so stinking cute, and I do have, like I said, I do think he'd be adorable in mohair. I have like some pink mohair and some orange mohair, and I think he'd just be really cute to have like a neon pink little mammoth. That'd be really cute. So this will definitely get used. I don't know if it's the first thing I'm gonna make because the plant rug situation is like a little more necessary than this, but otherwise I will be crocheting some smaller projects for pretty much the first time in like a really long time this year. So that seems really exciting and fun. Other than that, I do also knit a lot. So if you're new to my channel, definitely check out my knitting videos too. And thanks so much for watching.